Welcome back to the channel. I'm Coach Chris McMahon, and today we're talking everything about kettlebell windmills, specifically how to use the windmill to improve your hip mobility, hamstring mobility, and T-spine mobility. To clear things up, mobility is your ability to control strength at your end range of motion, versus flexibility, which is just passively being flexible. So for instance, my ability to just do that, versus my ability to pick up my leg and control that end range of motion. So that's where the windmill is such an awesome tool, because you are actually going to be moving in and out of your end range of motion for those areas of your body, and it is a bang for your buck movement. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. Kettlebell windmill requires quite a bit of hamstring, hip mobility, and T-spine mobility. Before we get to that variation, we first need to learn the most important part of the movement, which is actually your ability to shift your weight through your hips. Now, I enjoy doing this by first starting off practicing the triangle pose from yoga. To be able to perform the triangle pose, we need to first start off with our feet a little wider than hip width apart and having our toes facing at a 45-degree angle. From there, you'll reach out with your arms as much as possible and shift your hips back. From this position, I'll bring my one arm down, the other arm up, and reach up towards the sky. Notice that my back is flat. I'm reaching as much as I possibly can. Now, this can be really hard to get into if we're not sure where our body is in space. What I like to do is take a yoga block, place it against a wall, and for a beginner, have that block face lengthwise. Then I will lower it so my hip is there. Now my job is to shift my weight as much as I can into that yoga block. That's my range of motion right now. I'm shifting my weight, lower that a bit more, shifting my weight as much as I can into that yoga block so it does not move. If someone was trying to move it, I wouldn't be able to move it because I'm pushing my hips back as much as I can. Breathing deep into those hips. Push, 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 push. Now the goal isn't necessarily to be able to touch the ground. As you get more comfortable with this, you can take it where the block is closer to the wall. Bring that foot closer to the wall. And now I'm really working on just practicing that hip shift. Getting comfortable putting that weight into my trail leg and coming back up. That's where you can get started with learning how to shift your hips for the windmill. Like I said earlier, I like to use the triangle pose to help someone get a better understanding of where they're supposed to be in space for the windmill. But the triangle pose isn't exactly the windmill. For one, you have both legs straight in this position, and it's actually focusing on targeting the hamstrings a lot. But what we really want to do is be able to shift our weight into that back hip. So we're going to perform an unweighted windmill, which actually requires both legs to be at this 45-degree angle, but we'll have both knees bent. That slight bend in our knee as we push those hips back is going to have that sensation in that trail leg a little bit more. We're really going to focus on opening up that chest as much as we can and have the weight in that trail leg. So from here, you'll find that you get a different sensation through your body where it's really getting into that lower back area, into that glute. You might feel it a little bit in your hamstrings depending on where you're tightest. But again, we're going to have both legs bent for this variation. And here's the kicker for you. You never want to look away from that hand that's up in the air. You never want to look away from the bell, right? So you might actually find that this is your range of motion, and that's totally fine. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll get with it, both legs bent, and you come back up. So as you continue to work on this, there's different variations you can have in your body, but we're going to start with that bent leg variation. Variation number one is going to be the low windmill. Low windmill is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to be grabbing the bell from this low position. I'm going to have both knees bent. I'm going to shift my weight back. I'm going to allow my leg to come down so I can find that weight. And from here, both legs bent. I'll stand up. And then I'll trace that position down to the bottom, push my hips back. This low windmill position is just like a standard deadlift, but with legs bent. Now from here, I can have my arm up so I can practice looking towards that weight. I never change my position. Look up. Slow windmill is a fantastic variation that you can have to help you kind of guide that position. If you have any shoulder issues, the low windmill is going to be a great alternative for that shoulder pain, because we don't need to be pressing overhead to get all the benefits of the windmill. So again, if you have shoulder issues, stick with this low kettlebell windmill variation and you'll find that it's a great addition to any workout. But again, this is the starting point for pretty much everyone when it comes to that windmill. Once you've mastered the low kettlebell windmill, it's time to work to the high kettlebell windmill. Now I'm going to show you what this actually looks like. You're going to clean the bell up, press it overhead, turn those feet at 45 degrees, slight bend in the knee, look up at that bell, push the butt back, keep that weight in the trail leg, come down. Now you can be here, you can come all the way down to the floor depending on your flexibility. You can come here. Wherever you are, that's your level of flexibility for this particular movement. Don't get upset if you can't touch the ground. Eventually, you'll work up to that depending on your hip and hamstring mobility. Now, the thing that trips a lot of folks up is they don't actually know where they should be reaching in space. So as they lower themselves down, they might reach forward, and this is going to create a lot of torque through that lower back. We're actually going to see rounding through that lumbar. That could be further away from what we actually want to do. So what you're going to do is take another kettlebell and set it up right outside your foot, and you'll turn it so it's facing at this 90-degree angle. Okay, so as I come down, what you're going to do is you'll have that bell right there. You'll be able to reach for the bell right here. And you could technically pull it if you wanted to, but we're just going to use it as this guidance system to let us know, oh, hey, here's my bell, right? So from here, I'll press that bell up, have my feet turned out at 45 degrees, look up at the bell, come down, find the bell, whoop, come right back up, down, find the bell, always look at the bell, never look away from the bell, right back up. So that's how you would perform your high windmill, right? Now I'm going to show you the way that I actually like to perform it. There's a benefit here. One is I like to take advantage of this movement, make it as much a mobility-based movement as possible versus strength-based movement. So your feet are going to be turned out 45 degrees. The way I've been demonstrating this is with both knees bent, which is technically how they would show it at like a kettlebell certification, things like that, right? This bent position, maybe old-timey, right? That's where I'll be. Come up. What I like to do is I like to keep the back leg straight, and I like to have this front leg bent. So as I go into it, now I've got all of this glute, I've got all of this hip, I've got more hamstring, right? I've got more rotation coming from my T-spine, so I really like having that trail leg straight and that front leg bent. So it'll look something like this. Ooh, gotta watch here. That doesn't feel great. Here. Back leg straight, keeping all that weight in the back leg. Not a lot of weight in the front leg. Really forcing that leg back. And come back up. That feels very different. So there's two variations of the windmill right now. Number one is for beginning, have both legs bent, push that butt back, come here, and come back up. Variation two, back leg straight, front leg bent, push that butt back, and come up. The third variation that can feel pretty groovy, remember how we talked about that triangle position? This, in my opinion, requires the most amount of mobility because you actually have to control that entire range of motion because you are having both legs straight, really getting those hamstrings, really getting the obliques, really getting into that area of the body. So, press the bell up. I'm in triangle pose position. From here, keep that back straight. And up. So one more time. Push that butt back. Create length. Both legs straight. Come up. That's the triangle pose variation. So depending on where you are and what your specific goal is, you can use each variation. This bent leg variation is going to be more like a deadlift. This is more like a deadlift and an RDL hybrid. And then the straight leg variation is more like a stiff-legged RDL. And it's going to feel very good. A couple different variations. Again, remember from the get-go, if you have shoulder issues, you're not going to go overhead. You're just going to do the low windmill. And if you're just getting started with this and you're not sure about the rotation, what I should feel in my body, you will perform the low kettlebell windmill. Reach up. You could also do the variation here, like before. You can also, when you get very comfortable in advance, you can use 2 bells. Right, so I have my 2 bells here. It's both down. Straighten out that leg. Those are a few different variations of the windmill that you can incorporate into your training. But you might be saying to yourself, well, where exactly does it go in my programming? It's a great question. It depends on what your goal is. For the most part, I would consider the kettlebell windmill something that you're not loading up very heavy. Of course, you could perform something like a Turkish get-up with a heavy weight and then throw a windmill in there if you would like. But I think at a certain point, it's a risk-reward that you're not really sure what you're getting from. I mean, from old-timey standards, folks would do it with a barbell over their head with weight on each side. That's not something I am actively doing, but I would use heavier weight to maybe work on some more of the mobility benefits of it, but I wouldn't go for like a max PR or anything like that. So I would say your best bet is to have it in the beginning of your session, like a part of your movement prep as a way to get into your hips, T-spine, hamstrings, nice work there. You might also partner it with something like a squat. Any sort of rotational work that works the hip in that way could only help you and benefit your range of motion in the squat. But again, I would use lighter weight. So again, that's how I would consider it. Number of reps on each side. It depends on the variation you're doing. If you're doing something like a shoulder press to a windmill, then your reps might be a little bit higher, right? Because you're probably going to be using a lighter weight. Would you develop the most amount of shoulder strength doing that? No. Would you really develop a lot of shoulder stability doing that? Maybe, but you're also going to be exhausted, so you're probably not going to have the best results. So what I would suggest is I would use a little bit heavier of a weight, and I would focus on one press overhead, and then focus on holding that arm above head as you go for your reps. It will require more shoulder endurance, but I think that is a better situation that you can put yourself in. And I would say anywhere from like 3 to 5 reps on each side is more than enough per set. You really don't want to go above that because at a certain point you have to ask yourself what you're trying to do in the first place. So I hope that clears that up for you. And again, look, if you're like, I like kettlebells and I don't know where exactly to get started with any of this, what you can really do to make your life easier is click the link below, grab my 52 weeks of metabolic workouts. There's tons of kettlebell work in there. There's some tutorial videos in there, and it's a really helpful tool. No questions. All I need is your email address, and it gets sent right to your inbox. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you want more kettlebell videos or more breakdowns like this, comment below. Make sure you have notifications turned on. You give a thumbs up. You're subscribed to the channel, and I really appreciate you being here. So without further ado, remember, you're one day away from getting back on track, one day away from realizing how fucking amazing you are.